familiar faces here, and I've seen them at the CCA. So I'm not telling you anything new, I guess. You probably are better in explaining to me what the archive is, what you've been looking at, and I would be curious in those stories. And for others, maybe it is new, relatively. So, first of all, we are very honored to have the archive, which I think is for us, let's say, it's a research archive. It's interesting because it's not an architectural office archive, so the organization is different, and the structure of the archive is different than a typical archive of an architectural office. Let's say the archive of Peter Eisenman is very straightforward with projects, teaching, traveling, office. That's kind of the categories that you will find an archive being organized in. With the minimum cost housing archive, it's very different because it's a process, it's a lot of ideas, and that's actually really why it fits at the CCA and in the CCA, because for us at the CCA, architecture is really about ideas and about process, not about famous architect, not about iconic buildings, but it's really about the process and ideas and how to make these available for a research community. So the minimum cost housing archive is number 149. That means it is the 149th archive arriving at the CCA. The first one was Ernest Cormier, that is AP001. That's a very simple organization of our archives. And AP means Archives Privées for those. So why do we have this archive and how does it live within the CCA? I think the first conversations about the actual archive started with an exhibition that our director at the time, Hugo Sardini, did on the oil crisis. And I'm looking at Vikram because he was there and I wasn't. But I think that was a very important moment for, let's say, the conversation between the CCA and the Minimum Cost Housing Group about the archives. We showed materials in that exhibition, and it was the beginning, I think, of a relationship that then grew. There were other materials in exhibitions, and I think around 2014, 15, we started to speak about the archive. How do I move forward? Well, yeah. So I'm just going to show some random images of the archive, and then I'll go a little bit deeper on the structure of the archive. And I'm actually more interested in to hear from all of you what you find in the archive. So maybe we have time to discuss that. And also, I will say this is a bit of a rip-off because the exhibition that is on the other side of the campus has a lot of these materials available, and so it's much better to see it in the exhibition than to see it on the screen here, I think. So the archive lives at the CCA. I think what is interesting about the archive at the CCA is, as I said, idea and process, and then there's a lot of research inside the archive that we make available for many of you. And all of you, and that's also a little bit different than some of the other archives. We have similar archives at the CCA, such as I think, for example, the Institute. It's very different in subject, but the Institute of Architecture and Urban Studies archive, or the archive of ANI. And then later on, after the archive of the minimum cost housing came to the CCA, we also were offered the archive of the Institute for Tropenbau, which was collected by Georg Liebsmeier, who did actually very similar work. And I think that's always a conversation that we have among ourselves, like when we accept or not accept an archive, we say no to most things, I will say, is how materials, an archive, collection, an individual object, how it kind of relates to what we have. So in the case of the minimum cost housing archive, there was a clear relationship in the interest in environmental issues, social housing, affordable housing. We have the archive of Milton Park, for example, the Groupe de Recherche de Montréal. Not the same, but somewhat, there's areas that are relatable, let's say, but also how an archive or a collection can add to for research. So how can it also open new investigations? And this was with the minimum cost housing archive very clear. Then again, with the Institute for Tropenbau, the Georg Liebsmeier collection, again was related to the minimum cost housing archive, but then opened also new geographies, different geographies than were, let's say, part of the minimum cost housing archive. I will say that the archive, as most of you know, is fully catalogued. I'm now going quickly to, and you know all these images. This I like also a lot, all the letters that are in all the correspondence that are in the archive. Publications, enormous amount of publications. The sulfur blocks. And I'm very happy to see your presentation about that work that was for us actually a little bit, how can I say, very abstract. Let's say we did these sessions with you and we had no idea what was coming out of it. So it's very good to see another one. So here you see, if you go on our website, most of you know that, you search, you can find all the activities that we did around the minimum cost housing archive, and then of course if you go deeper, you find the finding aid. And there you can actually see what it is. A lot of textual records, photographic material, 83,000 and more, a lot of books, which is amazing for the library collection, prints, drawings, artifacts, panels, audio cassettes that are digitized, I think most of them, sketchbooks, models, and so forth. It's a really diverse archive in that sense. Then if you go deeper and if you search deeper, you will see that there are these series that you can go deeper into the archive. You can see what has been digitized. You can see how it lives within the archive, because what is different from an archive and, let's say, one photograph in the photo collection is that things relate to each other. And it is really this research and what you find. If you're interested in one letter that is in a box, you're interested in the other letters that are in the box. This is so difficult with research from a distance that you don't know the context. And this is also very different of everything that's digitized and online. You cannot really understand. If you open the folder, and I'm looking at Lee because he was at the CCA doing research in the last couple of days, and it's different if you see materials that relate to each other than just see the one object published in a book or published online. So you can find a lot of other kind of information about the archive. We, of course, made the archive available. I was asked to also speak about the use of the archive. It's available for, I would say, everyone, but we also know that it's mainly academic researchers that come to the CCA or for whom we digitize materials. But it's a very diverse group that comes. It is the people that are here in the room, it is students, but it's also sometimes people that are very specifically working very practical. I'm thinking of your work. On social housing or affordable housing, and so on and so forth. And so some people come very much from the academia. A lot of people come from the more, let's say, the practical business of architecture, and specifically social housing and affordable housing. To give you an idea, we have around 800 researchers coming every year to the CCA, to the study room, and I did a count specifically for this talk of those researchers that look at minimum cost housing materials, and it's about 10%, which is actually quite high. I don't think there's not many other archives that are being consulted that frequently, and I think it's the richness of the archive. You can find so many different things for so many different purposes that that is really incredible for the archive. It may not sound a lot, but it is actually quite a bit. And a lot of people, some people come specifically for the minimum cost housing archive. Many people just find it once they are at the CCA and they realize and they search deeper that there is material that relates to their research. What are we going to do in the future with the archive? Well, we're going to continue to investigate and continue to digitize materials. I'm sure it will appear again in exhibitions. We have a few in mind. Let's say that I think the material will appear in the future. And it's a continuous, for us, it's a continuous challenge also to make this material available online and to digitize more, but digitize it in such a way that it actually makes sense, not as individual objects, but as the body of work as a whole. Thank you.